So the session has officially started. Welcome, welcome. I can't see if people are joining already, but to those who are, welcome. Thank you for being on time. My name is Juan. I will be your host for this webinar today. And before we start, we're going to give a few minutes to those of us who are not as punctual as you are to finish that last cup of coffee, come back to their desks and join us. However, I'm quite curious to see who is all here today. So if you would like, please take this opportunity to write in the chat where you're joining us from and why you decided to come here today. Okay, I see the participants list is slowly filling up. That's great to see. So yes, just a quick note to those who have been slowly trickling in. We're going to give a couple of more minutes for people to join, seeing as we had a very, very nice sign up base. And we want to make sure that everybody's here, or at least as many of you are here before we start. So as I said, if you'd like, take this opportunity to write in the chat where you're joining us from and why you decided to come to this Sharpist webinar. We're going to wait for one more minute and then we can officially start. Hi from Berlin. Great to be here. Great to have you here, Christoph. Hi, Sway. Munich, very nice. So far a very German audience. It's great. Hola from Zurich. Hola, Anthony. Very nice to see that some people are joining. Slowly started to get warmed up. Hi to Düsseldorf. Hello from Berlin again. Hi, Ahan. Frankfurt am Main. Very nice, beautiful. We have Malgorzata from Poland. Hi. Hi, Malgorzata, welcome. Okay, so I think we've given people enough time to join, to slowly trickle in. So I would say let's officially start this new Sharpist webinar. Welcome everybody to this session titled Coaching for Organizational Transformations, How Coaching Can Deliver Transformation Success. My name is Juan Salazar. I lead the content team here at Sharpist, and I'm going to be your host and the moderator of today's discussion, because I am joined by two wonderful speakers here with me today, who are going to give you more insights and more knowledge that you think you could have about organizational transformation. So I would like to start by introducing Huram Masoud. He is Chief Product Officer here at Sharpist, and basically he leads the teams that build digital products for personalized and outcome-driven learning. Prior to joining Sharpist, he was the co-founder and Chief Operating Officer at the African Leadership University, which is a Pan-African leadership education institution, and it was selected by Fast Company as one of the 50 most innovative companies. That is Huram. And finally, we have Joey David Obi, who is one of our dear Sharpist coaches. He is an organizational development consultant, coach, and facilitator, and he has over 20 years of experience in consulting and coaching, focusing on international teams and on expert organization. It is really, really great to have you both with us today. I say, let's look at the agenda for today's discussion. We will be speaking about organizational transformations, as you could see from the title, but we're going to focus on three main topics. First, we want to talk about what organizational transformations are in the first place. Then we want to talk about the keys to successful organizational transformation. And after that, we're going to look into how coaching programs can help you deliver a successful organizational transformation. So without further ado, I say we jump right into the first point of this discussion. Just for everybody in the audience to be clear, I'm going to be posting some questions for both Joey and Huram, and they will basically take turns, take them up as they come. So I would like to start with a little bit of context. Most companies are undergoing transformation We read a recent survey where 9 out of 10 HR leaders said that their company was undergoing such a process. So what exactly is an organizational transformation?
Cool. I can jump in on that one. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so organizational transformation, as the word suggests, it's a time in an organization where there's significant change, right? The key word here is change. It's a time where an organization decides that they want to undergo a significant shift in, number one, their strategy, right? And in order to successfully implement that change in their strategy, they need a significant change in the culture and the mindsets and behaviors of their people, right? Now, this change might be stimulated through an external event, like a market change. I think most companies had to undergo transformation because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic implications of that. Or it could be an internal change where a new CEO decides that they want to become a more digital company and they want to undergo a transformation where they have more digital orientation of the products. For example, a car company decides to become fully electric, right? That is a transformational strategy, right? Now, the important thing to note is that that change in strategy has to, in most cases, come with a change in culture, right? So the way in which the people behave in an organization needs to change in order for that transformation to be successful. So as you put up there, transformation can be summarized as a big change in strategy and culture. But I would like to hear from the real expert here, which is Coach Joey, around whether he agrees with me and whether he has something to build on as this definition goes.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. And Juan, thank you for your nice introduction that you gave just now. I would agree with Huram on this one. I don't know if we're going to agree on everything today, but that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the need for transformation, as Huram said, it might be external or internal. There's been so much transformation going on, and lots of them, for example, the digital transformation really does necessitate, doesn't it, changes in leadership and in culture and in strategy, how leadership works and how teams work. The pandemic has shown that really having to, in many companies' cases at least, to adapt overnight to new ways of working. So that's a transformation as well. But I think at the end of the day, the real reason for these large-scale transformations that we have is to ensure companies and organizations' survival so that they can thrive in future. And without that element, I don't really think transformation can be successful, because there needs to be some sense of urgency in transformations. Maybe that, Juan, will bring us on to another topic as well. You know, what's the bottom line? Why do we need to transform? And from my point of view, it's just so that we can survive in future, so that companies can go on being successful. But that necessitates, doesn't it, reflection, and away from the business side, although it's very deeply ingrained into the business side as well. What does that mean for the people and how they cooperate and how they collaborate with one another, both within the company, but also into the wider environment?
Thank you very much, both of you. Sorry, I wanted to make a quick point before we go on. I forgot to mention that you should feel free at any time to write your questions in the chat to the audience, to all of you. We'll try to take them on into the flow of conversation as much as we can. However, we will have some time for Q&A at the end. However, we would like to engage you as much as possible, so please bring your questions and we'll try to take them on. Back to organizational transformations and the points that both of you just raised. It seems like organizational transformations are the one thing that companies have to focus on in specific points in their existence, be it threats from the market, new opportunities, etc. I was reading some research by McKinsey, which suggests that most transformational processes fail, actually. So I think it would be interesting for us to hear from you, why do these transformation process fails? What are companies missing or lacking when conceiving of and rolling out these processes?
Yeah, one, I think we, I'd like the audience to know that, you know, when I was at McKinsey for about 5.5 years. And one of my areas of expertise, the kind of work that I did, was help lead organization transformations, right? And when that report, which, you know, became I think it's a bit overused. I think the number is 70% of all transformations fail. I was there at the time that report was at least rewritten, if not written for the first time. But I must say, whatever that number is, it is a real experience of every transformation consultant that you are likely to fail, right? There is a deep feeling, and anybody who's done a few before or been part of a few before has this realization that we have fundamentally failed in delivering what the transformation initially sought out to achieve, right? So there's usually a McKinsey strategy consulting project with the CEO or CXO, which is done beautifully well. It sets out a clear direction, which on paper looks like, okay, if done, this seems fairly clear that we will succeed in moving KPIs, both financial and organizational health, from X to Y, and we set clear targets, right? And by fail, we mean, and I think there's a question there from Stephanie, but failure means that you did not meet those initial objectives that you set at the end of the phase of strategy of what the goal of that transformation is. And it's not just taken as, oh, you had to meet exactly the outcomes, but somewhere in the range of those outcomes, right? It's usually transformations fail, and they fail significantly far away from the KPIs that were originally intended, right? And so now the question that Juan asked, why do they fail, right? And I think, for those of us who've lived through it, it comes down to first and foremost, this is the first most important reason, I think, and then I hand over to Joey, is there is a lack of conviction and buy-in among all levels of leadership, and following that among the entire organization to own the transformation, right? It's usually what the transformation is and what they hope to do is set by a very small set of people, typically with external consultants. And that buy-in across all the layers of the organization is not there, right? So it's brought in and said, hey, this is where we want you to go, right? Rather than this is where we want to go, and we all understand why, and we all bought in, and we have the sense of conviction and belief that this is the right way to go, right? So that the first reason I would say transformation fails is that at every layer in the leadership, particularly so in the organization, there is a lack of conviction and buy-in and ownership of the transformation goals. Joey?
Yeah, I mean, I love Stephanie's question that she's put in. What is the definition of failure, and what is the definition of success? I think we could go into that for a long time, because but what I would want to add to what you've said, Huram, is the issue of complexity. I think it's all very well, and you're talking about your former employer there. It doesn't need to be McKinsey, whoever it is, managers as well, having a fantasy of a very manageable process, but then realizing while they're in it, that it is just so complex. There's a reason why we talk about a VUCA world, or I read recently moving from VUCA to a Barney world, which is brittle and anxious and non-linear and incomprehensible. There are just so many plates that people have to keep whirling around, or balls in the air. So actually, I think it's quite understandable that because of this complexity, that lots of things fail if they've been approached in such a reductionist way. But that leads us to the question, doesn't it, is how can actual transformations be, I'll be careful with the word managed, but be dealt with in a better, perhaps more adult way. So bottom line for me there is underestimating the complexity of change processes, which is a major reason why these things fail.
Yeah. I see some alignment between both of you, and just to, as a quick summary, we've said that lacking engagement from leadership and lack of buy-in, and alignment or buy-in is the right way of saying it, is one key factor on why a transformation process might not be as successful as planned. The other one being overwhelmed with complexity. So obviously a transformation process is not a very linear and straightforward course of action. And we also know that some skills are crucial in order to be able to affect this change, and affect this change in an organizational way, like communication skills and being able to guide and to role model some of these desired behaviors. So what would you say are the implications of all of this? So we've talked about what the organizational transformation means, what threatens successful organizational transformations. But how does a mismanaged, as you very aptly called it, Joey, how does a mismanaged transformation affect leaders, affect teams, and affect organizations?
I really like this triad that you put on the individual leader, then the team, and then the organization. If we start with the leader, I mean, this is disappointment, isn't it? A feeling of failure themselves. There is a lot of pressure on leaders, and then being confronted with this dysfunction can, of course, have very personal ramifications for the people. Also, if we go to the level of the teams, yeah, it's similar there, isn't it, at that level? This feeling of not having done well, and blaming can start. So different organizational defenses can start to play a role. But for the organization itself, it means not fulfilling those actual business objectives in there. So I think it's quite an easy question to ask, really. The objectives aren't fulfilled. And that leads to all sorts of consequences at different levels. And at the end of the day, it means burning money as well, because if 70% of these projects fail, then there are real consequences for that. So I think we really need to be thinking about how we can do change better so that we have a better investment in leading to success and change.
Yeah,
I don't know what you would see, Huram, on that.
Yeah, no, I just want to build on something you said earlier, and also what's underlying in the tone of what you're talking about, Joey. You know, it's, I think, the psychology of change. You mentioned typically the complexity of the change is underestimated, right? And I think there's a certain psychology of change, and it's in that territory of you don't know what you don't know when you're entering sort of a change situation, right? And this is where sort of organizations frequently trip up, right? Because it's approach transformation planning and resourcing is done in a very logical head way, right? There's a huge factor of emotions and heart that comes with change at all levels, at the leadership level, at the team level, and at the organizational level, right? Which is what makes transformation, I think, particularly complex, right? And very hard nut to crack, especially from the, you know, Harvard, McKinsey, Stanford sort of world, which comes at it from a very head logical way to approach planning and resourcing these transformations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some great work, isn't there, on how do smart people learn on McKinsey consultants. We shouldn't talk about McKinsey too much, but this sense of shame that people might have, not knowing things, can have a real effect in organizations. So it's how to deal with that and how to reflect in these processes that I think we can guide transformation and change into new waters in the future.
Yeah, very, very insightful. Thank you both. So I think also as a summary, you know, it's a failure to see not only the business implications or the strategic and operational implications of a transformation process, but failing to see the human side of it. And how devastating it can be to not have that already guiding your planning and your thought, and only caring about that at implementation. Before we continue, I would like to break off a little bit this wonderful dialogue to include some people of the audience, if you would be willing to participate. I would like to see, or we would like to see, if anyone here is going through a transformation process in their organization at the moment, or has, you know, now that we've defined it and now that we've explained a little bit more, how it's done and the implication that it has, it would be great to see if someone here is actually going through that at the moment. So you can use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we will be able to see if we have any takers. So while we wait for some answers and for some volunteers, I think that it would be a good time now to move on to a second part of the discussion. I think one that is more interesting, because we know now about transformations, and we know that they tend to fail, and we know that that has massive implications. But we're not here to talk about what goes wrong. We're here to talk about how to do it right. So it would be really fitting now to go into the second part of the discussion, which is about success. I would like us to try to unlock the secret recipe here, if there's any secret recipe. But what would you say are the most important elements to a successful organizational transformation?
Yeah, maybe I can get started there, right? I think for me, you know, there's 3 parts to this, right? 3 things that make organization transformation successful. I'm going to come from it maybe from a little bit of the more head part, right? So one is, you know, we spoke about this conviction and buy-in, right? I think that's crucial. And what's important about conviction and buy-in is that there is buy-in at every level in the organizational layers. I reiterate this, right? Having been part of a couple of failed transformations, the issue was that, we had lots of buy-in, lots of hand slapping around, wow, this is great, we should go there. But we failed to get the buy-in across the entire organization, right? Failed to get everybody sort of believing that this is the future we need to go. I think that's number one, right? Number two, and I think we alluded to it in the previous slide as well, is it's a set of skills, right? There is a concrete set of skills that every leader especially needs to learn in order to be able to be a successful leader in a transformation, no matter what level you are, whether you're a first level leader, middle manager, VP, or a CXO or the CEO, right? There are a set of leadership skills that you need to succeed in a transformation. That's number two, right? And number three, it's about mindsets and behaviors. There's a whole lot of soft stuff around how people need to live in the new world, right? How they need to behave, how they need to act, right? To take an analogy, right? If you are thinking about, transformation of your body, right? Say, okay, I now, want to become, muscular, right? Because I want to enter into a weightlifting competition, let's say, right? So that's a transformation, right? Why is it a transformation? You just decided that you want a completely different body from what you had before. It's not about losing a couple of pounds. It's not about, feeling a bit healthier. It's a full transformation. You want to become bulky and muscular because you want to enter into weightlifting competition, right? First of all, you've got to have a sense of conviction and belief and buy-in around that, right? Secondly, you got to know the skills required to get there, right? Not just in terms of, you can't just go to a gym and start lifting weights. You need to know the nutrition that goes with it. You need to know how much protein you need. You need to know, so you're going to need a set of skills, right? And then thirdly, finally, your mindsets, mindsets and behaviors are completely different. You can't be that person who goes to parties every Saturday, right? You will not build that body, right? There is a new way of living. So there's a whole new set of mindset. You probably have different friends. You probably, have different hobbies, right? And so when an organization goes through transformation, right, there are all of these things that need to come together, right? A different set of skills that leaders are equipped with to be able to lead that transformation, a shared sense of conviction, as well as new mindsets.
I'm just really wondering if Huram was talking from experience with his analogy there.
On another failed transformation.
As a failed transformation. I didn't want to say anything, but I think what's really interesting here on this slide, and I'd want to go in, Juan, if that's okay, a bit more on the leadership skills in a little bit. But this shared sense of conviction, especially in the top team, especially among the leaders, you can't force everyone. I get pimples when I hear about leaders in change say, we need to take everyone with us. People aren't objects. So it's about inviting people, making it beguiling, making it attractive to do that. There has to be a reason. And this role modeling new mindsets, lots of this stuff is about culture, but culture, of course, is only a shadow of behaviors. You can't change culture on its own, you have to change behavior. So one of the key things in role modeling new mindsets, it says here on the slide, to shift behavioral patterns, but this is where the link comes in between the three things here. You have to be able to notice these patterns as well. And that's why I think one of the most important leadership skills is noticing. And that's maybe something that we can go into in a little bit. But I don't know, Juan, how you're going to, we've agreed again on this, haven't we? I think.
Yeah, I think, Joey, I think where you started to go is for me the most interesting, right? So say, what are these skills, right? Yeah. So we keep talking about, I think we've labeled a lot of things. I'd love for you to sort of take us through what are these skills that are required for transformation.
Okay. I think I'd go on to 3 areas that we know, maybe 4. I'll come to a 4th in a little bit. But, lots of change when people say, how will we do the transformation? That's okay, but that's only half of it. Because something that I really like to work with is a concept of being goes before doing. So the first set of leadership skills, and here you can see this still moving model that I really like to use, is at the bottom. How am I being? What is my being? So the inner capacities in change. And this is looking at your presence. So what are you noticing? And we all have our triggers, don't we, as people and as leaders, things that get us started, things where we just say, okay, he's saying this, that's because he's like this. So our tendency to be judgmental in change is especially important, that we just say, well, actually, what is required of me at this moment? How present am I? How capable am I of really listening and noticing and perceiving what's going on? Because if you do that, you'll come out of your autopilot that lots of us have, of course, and be able to respond with openness and with curiosity. So I think that's one important thing, to know, how is it affecting me? You know, I'm in a meeting here and I'm saying for the 50th time why this is important, and the people just start listening to me, and it's frustrating me. And to use this frustration as data, and to be able, a little bit like an anthropologist, to observe that, to gain self-distance, to look, well, actually, what is the organization wanting here? And how am I reacting to that? So how am I being that we don't go into that autopilot reaction, but we choose actually how we need to respond at the moment. And then the second part in this cone is the how am I doing change? So this is the ABC of change management, really, the external practices. And here there are 4 points that I would like to go into. So what is the purpose of the change? Are we really showing what the purpose of the change is? Are we showing that as leaders as well? You know, are we living this? Are we being an example to the change? And the second point here I would go into is the third thing in this green part, the channeling the anxiety. This is important because all transformations, like all good projects, need good structures, tidy processes, they need transparency. But especially in large-scale transformations, people can get worried about what's happening. So this ability of leaders here as a leadership practice to be able to channel this anxiety, so that people know through psychological safety that it is okay for them. So there are two things in how am I doing change that offer stability, purpose, and container is the psychological word for that, channeling anxiety. But change is, of course, not just about keeping things stable, but actually enacting the change. And I think one of the most important skills that leaders should have in change is not to shy away from naming reality, from actually speaking the truth, from clear speaking. So not putting things in cotton wool, but actually facing the disturbance and trying to amplify the disturbance in the organization as well, but in a respectful way. And then also living the desired change. I've accompanied lots and lots of change projects in the past and sat in meetings where people talk about what we need to change. But why don't people change things in the moment? So Huram spoke before about modeling mindsets, about changing patterns. But I think leaders, when they notice patterns, need to name the pattern, say, why are we doing it like this and this? Why don't we do it like that, and start now? So I think living the desired change is important as well. And I know I'm speaking too long now, Juan, but the last point I would go into here is at the top, attending to the system. And I think this is a really important point about having a bit more knowledge about how human dynamics work. You know, people want to belong. People want to know that they're making a contribution. And in transformation, in change, that can, of course, come out of kilter because things change. People don't know who their teams are. They don't know where they will belong. They don't know how they can give their best. So I think it's important to look at those aspects as well. And of course, in a change, there's always a sense of exchange, isn't there? People win and people lose in change. Who pays the price for the prize? And that's important to look at that as well, to see how those dynamics are working out. I'm very happy someone just said, being before doing, they like that. I'll give you another little nugget that can be helpful as well. All leaders, nearly everyone, has got used to having a to-do list in the last few years. We have very long to-do lists. Perhaps to be a successful leader in transformations, you should think about having a to-be list, because how you show up in the organization, has a real effect. You can see here, it's the cornerstone of everything. So how you show up by having a to-be list. How do you want to be? And to model your behavior on that. So I'll stop now and see if Huram has anything to add.
No, I think
my
that was,
monologue there. Yeah.
no, that was beautifully said. And I think this is so enlightening because, you know, we always wonder, what are the skills, right? I mean, people keep saying there are particular skills you need to learn in order to be a successful change leader. There are very few leaders who get an education on these skills, right? And it's so crucial that when an organization is undergoing a transformation, that you're very deliberate about saying, hey, can we get these skills to these leaders? Otherwise, we know we will fail in our transformation.
Mm-hmm. And I also think that it is a beautiful model that you just presented, Joey, because it's very complete. It really spans the whole spectrum of you showing up as a leader, or it starts with that, starts with self-awareness and builds also into then managing yourself, managing other people, and then affecting change throughout, and also living out, being a role model, being the model of the transformed organization within your own little piece or little part as a leader. Something that I'm also interested in, because this feels like there's many things to learn within a short amount of time, because transformation has to happen, and it seems like it takes, or it presupposes that you're going to be able to, go about this self-discovery and about this learning process in a linear way without any disturbance, right? But most transformations, and as we said also in the beginning about the context within which these transformations are happening, with a very volatile, uncertain world, I would assume that there's a role that agility and flexibility play in all of this. Would you agree with me? What would you say is the role of these two, of agility and flexibility in a successful transformation strategy?
I mean, that's the other part here where I didn't speak to before. So this is, how are we approaching change? And how change was done in the past, which is perhaps what Huram alluded to, how consultancies have done in the past, is to have a big master plan that we know what's happening in October 2024. And of course, that's a very rigid model. And the world is changing so fast, so that doesn't really help. So one way that could really help here is perhaps to work in a more emergent way. So where do we really need to start? Where is the hotspot in the organization that we need to start and attend to that, and do only that, to have a razor sharp focus on a few things, and then to move on to the next part. Now, sometimes, especially in large organizations, such an emergent, very, very agile way of doing these things isn't really possible. But there is an alternative to having this very directive change, and that would be called here a masterful change approach, where I like this picture of a leader as a conductor. He says, this is the piece we're playing, that all you guys and women in the orchestra are experts at what you do. So I'm not going to tell you how to do it, because you have the mastery yourself. But to be able to do that, and that's something that doesn't happen very often in change programs in the past, is to build that change capacity so that people actually have the space to do that. So I think that would be my answer to that. Yeah, is we can't be too rigid in the approach towards change, but working in a more now and next attitude can be really helpful to that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joey, because I think that ties in really well with the final point that we wanted to touch on, which is how you can leverage coaching for a successful transformation. And you might say I'm biased because I work at a digital learning platform that offers coaching as the central piece of our puzzle, and I have experienced firsthand the benefits of coaching. But I could see definitely a way in which coaching can allow you to be flexible or stay flexible and agile. By focusing on what's important at the moment without losing sight of the greater horizon of the transformation. I would say that coaching is typically thought of as a tool, or is used in leadership development, or in situations where you want to increase business performance. Why would you say that it is also useful, or something that people can leverage in order to support the transformation process?
Yeah, and before we get into that answer, right, I want to take you into the room where I was talking to one of our customers, Franca. I don't know if we have any customers from there joining today. We've been working with Franca for the last 3 years for coaching for leadership development, right? So we've had coaches assigned to Franca, and I think Joey is one of the coaches as well, coaching some Franca leaders, right? And Franca just started a new transformation called the One Franca transformation, right? They have a new strategy with clear new culture principles and mindsets that they want to move the organization towards over the next couple of years. The interesting thing is that this organization didn't see the direct link about how the coaching could be used directly in supporting that transformation, right? And I think this is where sort of, for me, this webinar is so important. And if we have any of our customers or prospective customers who are looking for coaching, to really sort of pay attention, because we've just been through a webinar where, if I was to synthesize, we said, you know, transformations are happening all the time in companies. Transformations frequently fail. And what can help make them successful is developing a specific set of leadership skills for transformations. It is enabling fostering of conviction and ownership of the leaders. And it is a change in the mindsets and behaviors of especially the leaders, so that they can role model it for the rest of the organization. All of these three things are best delivered through coaching, right? And especially if you can do a coaching effort as a cohort where you bring all of your leaders in, right, across the hierarchies, and you're able to partner as a team of coaches, right, with the organization to brief the coaches and say, you know, this is where we are on, this is the transformation we're on, this is the strategy we have, this is the culture change we want to see. Hey, coaches, help us work with our leaders, equip them with the specific skills required for transformation, help them go from mindset A to mindset B, which is where we want to be in these transformations, right? Once you start to do that and tailor the coaching program towards a successful transformation, then I think you significantly improve the chances of success in that transformation, especially after you've had a consulting firm, like, you know, strategy consulting firm, who's given you the booklet on where you need to be. You still need to invest in coaching in order to help drive that change forward. I'd like to invite Joey to sort of take us into the micro and share examples for how you think, you know, we could work with the company and the individual leaders to help take them there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. That is a fantastic advantage of coaching, whether that's individual one-on-one coaching or team coaching with leaders. To be able to have someone accompanying the individual leaders during this transformation, because it is hard work and there are lots of questions, and it might not be appropriate, or it might not be safe in some cases to speak about this with colleagues. So to have someone who knows about these skills as a Sherpa or as a sparring partner, I like the word Sherpa actually, taking people through these things and in real time as well. So not something that's done in a seminar and then can be or should be adapted later, but really in very frequent meetings to talk about this as it's actually happening, to be able to leverage these skills. And how to put that in, I think, as Huram has just said, to be able to work with a group of coaches on this, but also with leadership teams, because of course there are individual coaches who can work with people, but with leadership teams as well, because they need to be aligned in these transformation projects, and to work on that, not just how they're showing up individually, but also collectively in this reflective process. I think it really, really does have very, very great advantages.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to take it to the micro level on how we do this at Sharpist, right? We have a transformation package, right, where we work with a company and say, okay, let's work with you to first of all understand what are the goals of your transformation, right? Then let's identify who your leaders are, who are the critical hotspot leaders who need to be fully aligned on this transformation. Let's identify them, right? Let's match them with coaches who are experts in transformation skills. And let's brief these coaches, right? To make sure the coaches know, right, why you've engaged them. Why have you hired this coaching program? It's not just generic, okay, let's just match you with a coach and there you go, and hopefully you achieve something. We are very specific with coaches and telling them, okay, please make sure we take these leaders from A to B, both in terms of skills and mindsets around this transformation. And then we launch in this transformation with specific measurement of the skills and mindset change. So we can see the ROI, right? We measure the skills, we report on how are we moving in terms of each of these leaders both on the skills as well as the mindset change, right? So you can see here sort of, how it then becomes successful, right? We get engagement and alignment. So all the leaders are now engaged and aligned through the coaches, right? Because they have an opportunity to reflect on whether they believe in the transformation or not, and they can debate it with the coaches. Then there is a focus on both skills and mindset change. And then there's a frequent measurement and reporting of the transformation so that you have support and you're not just left as an HR team to drive this change all on your own, but you have a team of coaches who are basically your partners, who are your link with the key leaders of the transformation in order to make that change possible.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this wonderful discussion. I wish it could go longer, but I just had a look at the clock, and we're running out of time, unfortunately. So before we drop off and leave at least a minute or two for questions, I would like to summarize for everybody what we've been talking about. So I think there's three main points, three main messages. The first one is that most companies undergo transformations, and unfortunately, most of them are unable to deliver on their transformation goals. Therefore, they miss out on all of the value that these transformations can bring. The second point is that companies need alignment, skill development, and mindset shifts in order to be able to successfully roll out a transformation process. And finally, what we've just talked about is how to leverage coaching. So coaching can help support the rollout of the transformation because it helps people develop the critical skills required for leaders to drive these transformations, and also to be able to role model the mindsets and behaviors of the transformed organization, so of the future state, to all employees. And I think at this point, because Huram mentioned Sharpist, and I think this is a great point to talk a little bit about what we do, because we offer a digital coaching solution that is specifically designed to support an organizational transformation. Our solution stands out in the market because it's designed, as Huram just said, to drive high engagement, to deliver on both organizational and individual outcomes. And we also offer unmatched levels of scalable customization and support. So if you would like to know more, if you're going through a transformation process or planning one, please schedule a call with our team using the link that we're going to paste in the chat in a couple of seconds. And now I think it's a good time to take some final questions from the audience. I see one question here from Oktay. Oktay wants to know, what is a good percentage of implemented new skills and mindsets to consider transformation through coaching a success? So what would be a target achievement percentage, I assume, of new skills and mindsets?
I can take an initial crack at this. I think what we usually do is we sit down with the HR and the coaches. We identify a set of skills, which are typical change management, change leadership skills, right? And then we identify a set of mindsets, which are typical for the company, right? So those are always customized mindsets. And what we do is we do pre and post surveys, or pre, mid, and post surveys, where we ask the individuals, leaders who are undergoing the coaching, where they see themselves standing on each of these skills. What we're looking for is not necessarily a percentage change on each of these things, which is from to. What we're looking for is a forward momentum, forward movement, right? And what we want to see is anywhere in the order of 10% change, right, on at least 2 or 3 skills out of, let's say, 5 or 6, right, for each individual leader. Some leaders will move on some skills first, other leaders will move on other skills first, right? But the most important thing to see is that, is there some forward momentum and movement as part of the program? As long as you have that, it means that you have some buy-in. It means that the leaders are engaging and they're actually moving forward, and they will eventually get that. I don't know, Joey, if you have a perspective on that.
Well, I mean, you're the salespeople from Sharpist, so that's your role to say that, respecting the boundaries that we have here. From my point of view as a coach, I would say you need to have a baseline. This needs to be done with each customer individually, but also good skills apart from the side of the KPIs, and that needs to be done with every customer, of course. But leading through transformation is a relational thing. It's about leaders really engaging with their people so that they can entice everybody into that, because it's just so beguiling. And I think you'll be noticing that as well. But I think at the end of the day, what I would say is that it needs to be obviously an improvement, but setting what is the baseline, where are you at the moment, and then deciding individually what sort of increases in those behaviors that need to be seen. But it is, and that's a good thing about a digital tool like this, and having a set of coaches who know what the objectives are together with a partner like Sharpist, to be able to actually measure that, because that's really at the end of the day what you want to be seeing.
Yeah, and I also really carefully look at engagement, right? How frequently and how often are the leaders showing up for their coaching? Very important, right? Leaders are busy and they have 101 excuses to not show up to their coaching. When I see leaders engaging more and more with their coaching, right? Sometimes you even find in that certain skills, they'll go backwards, right? And that's because they've learned something which they didn't know before. They thought they were really good at self-awareness, for example, right? And then they realize, oh, actually, I have a lot more blind spots than I thought. And then they might go backwards. But as long as they're showing up regularly with the enthusiasm and engagement, it means that you're moving forward towards a successful gain in those skills and mindsets that you need for the transformation.
Wonderful. Let's see if anybody else has a question. But I would say, thank you for posing your question, Oktay. I would say that now we can conclude this webinar. We're 1 minute above time, so sorry for that. But yeah, the discussion was too engaging and too interesting to cut it short. So at this point, I would like to thank both of you. Thank you, Huram. Thank you, Joey. And thank you, everybody who came to this webinar to engage, to discuss, and to learn something new. As I've mentioned, if you would like to know more about Sharpist, please don't hesitate to schedule a call with our team, and hopefully see you for the next Sharpist webinar. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good evening.